So I'm just going to be introducing the speaker because Austin will be talking more about GACS and EAHR as a whole. So Austin Henderson is an artist and second-year MA student in the Department of Art History at Concordia University. Austin holds a BFA in Visual Arts from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. He has studied internationally at the UNSW Art and Design in Sydney, Australia, and the New York Academy of Art. Austin's artwork has been exhibited in Canada and the US. Austin's MA research investigates how Hollywood cinema and corresponding aspects of popular culture have influenced contemporary artistic and cultural production. His research is methodologically informed by queer theory, social history, film theory, and material culture. Austin has his writing has been published in the essay Art and Opinion. Currently, Austin serves as the editorial coordinator for the Ethnocultural Art History Research Group EAHR and the vice president of the Art History Graduate Student Association at Concordia University. So Austin will be talking more about the GACS conference and the subsequent exhibitions that were created as a result of that. Let's figure out things.
We need to set the recording on.
You guys need to record actually, doesn't give me permission.
Okay, the record button.
We can, yeah, we'll record it starting now.
Great.
Alright. Hi Beatrice. You can't see me, so hi. Okay.
I'm holographic right now.
Okay, we're recording. Great, okay. So good. Okay. Thanks, Diane. And then you want to...
Should I do Beatrice now too? Okay, sure. So Beatrice Glow is an interdisciplinary artist, researcher leveraging participatory performance, experimental technology, olfactory art, sculptural installation to shift dominant narrative on diasporic and Indigenous experiences in order to advocate for a more environmentally and racially just future. She's currently a 2019-2020 Lower Manhattan Cultural Council Workspace Artist and has been named a 2018/19 Smackmelon Studio Program Artist and 2018-2019 Smithsonian Artist Research Fellow affiliated with the National Portrait Gallery and the National Museum of American History. She was a 2017-2018 01 American Arts Incubator Artist, teaching new media workshops in Ecuador to amplify Indigenous and Afro-Ecuadorian voices. Her 2016-2017 Asia Pacific American Institute at NYU residency led to a virtual and augmented reality project, the Wayfinding Project, and Manhattan VR, and public installation Lenapepe in allyship with Indigenous environmental stewardship. Recent activities include solo exhibitions, Flower and Forts in 2019 at the Taipei Contemporary Art Center, Spice Routes 2017 at the NYU Institute of Fine Art, America Parfumer in 2016 at the Museum National de Belle Art de Chile at Chile, and Manhattan Tea Room at Wave Hill, a group show at the Honolulu Biannual 2017, Park Avenue Armory and Gallery National Indonesia, a keynote presentation at New York University, and a Duke University Press Cultural Politics Journal Artist featured.
So I think I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes on the exhibitions and gaps, and then we will pass the mic to Beatrice to speak to her work, especially I think the exhibitions in GACS, but also the current exhibition in the Department of Geography here at Concordia. So first and foremost, I'd like to give a big thank you to CUJAH's organizing committee and volunteers for helping today go so smoothly. And I'm very honored to be here to speak on behalf of GACS, the student research team, and the Ethnocultural Art Histories Research Group, or EAHR, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with. As I'm here today as a representative for both GACS and EAHR, I would first like to position myself as a white settler Canadian. One of the most gratifying experiences of my grad student experience thus far has been my ongoing involvement with GACS and with EAHR. Among other invaluable lessons, it has provided me with a rich understanding of the realities and difficulties often faced by underrepresented and marginalized communities within and beyond Canada. And with that said, I am deeply humbled to be sharing this space with you all today. and I'm sure that we can engage in a conversation that stems and grows from today's presentation. And with that, I'd like to just give an aside for tonight's catalog launch. The GAPS catalog launch is a part of the finissage in the fourth space at 7:30, right? So I hope all of you can attend and check that out, because that's kind of like, not the end result of GAPS by any means, but definitely something that, as an example, that keeps the conversation going. So as Diane said, I currently serve as EAHR's editorial coordinator, and today I'll be in company with Beatrice Glow to speak to GAPS, which stands for Global Asia Pacific Art Exchange, an interdisciplinary conference that was held here at Concordia this past June. My GAPS journey began in September of 2018 when I was in Dr. Alice Jim's graduate seminar curating Asian Indigenous, and little did I know it would bloom into a working relationship that would continue to this moment and most definitely onward. Last winter, I joined the GAPS research team, which comprised of undergraduate, master's, and PhD students, and we hit the ground running. Oh my gosh, my PowerPoint.
Oh yeah.
Do we need it? Like, it's fine. We can look at the pictures later. Yeah, because sorry. Just like visualize it. To acknowledge their invaluable time and labor given to the project, I would like to share the names of my fellow GAPS team members: Elizabeth Davis, Laurence Chalabois, Hans Luan, Alexander Nordstrom, Renata Curtin-Papp, Kiara Montpetit, Mikhail Prou, Adam Kadaret, Kanwal Syed, and Nima Ashmalpour. The team began with grant writing, as many of these projects often do, contacting the participants that we would welcome to Concordia, and most significantly, we began preparing the series of exhibitions that would accompany GAPS's program. GAPS has evidently expanded since it began nearly 10 years ago as a sort of scholarly partnership between Dr. Jim and Alexander Chang at NYU. This past June, Concordia welcomed over 40 Canadian and international artists, curators, scholars, and researchers in order with a sort of ultimate aim to exchange knowledge about relational approaches to the making, presentation, and study of Asian and diasporic art. One of the most exciting things about seeing this conference come together was to be able to meet and to interact closely with the scholars and artists we had been reading about and communicating with for several months, and for a lot of us, a lot longer. More importantly, GAPS provided, and will most definitely continue to provide, rich opportunities for its community to see and to understand both the commonalities and differences in their respective practices. Many of the participants had never met each other before the conference began, so being a very small gear in this machine was nothing short of a pleasure. One of the more tangible ways that the GAPS team would see these commonalities come to fruition, especially with the participating artists, was through its conferences exhibition programming. Myself, along with my colleagues on the research team, wanted to ensure that these works were in active dialogue with one another. So we were fortunate enough to host 4 satellite exhibitions to coincide with the conference's programming. We had the art history department vitrine just outside on the floor.
Do you have slides for it?
We do.
Yeah, we
Can
put
you
it on.
pull it up?
It's Zoom, it should be easy to switch.
We're gonna minimize.
Yeah.
Beatrice, we're gonna minimize you temporarily.
You can also share screen, it's like the green button.
Share screen.
At the bottom.
Ah. Okay.
I think it's the one with the previous presentation.
This one?
Google Chrome.
The Chrome, yeah, you have to go on Chrome, it's on Chrome.
And then
Ah.
is it
Okay.
copy of the phone?
You just go on the
That's interesting.
drive. And then, I think it's the last one.
No, that was my
Presentation.
and that was the one. I don't think I have.
There you go, do that.
No. I think you can only do that.
Oh, yeah, it's on the screen.
Sorry, everyone.
Just go to the desktop.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Sorry.
Okay.
That's, how do I move
All this is just lessons for the next time we use this technology. Scotch tape.
That's really smart.
Uh-huh.
Maybe that's fine. It should be good. Click.
But they do have issues of the exhibitions that they're gonna talk about.
Just gonna catch up with ourselves. This is GAX's logo and graphic. This is by EAHR, a Samoan artist. That's where we left off. Okay. So where was I? Yes, we were fortunate enough to host 4 satellite exhibitions to coincide with GAX, the Art History Department Vitrine, the EV Junction, the Webster Library Vitrine seen to your left, and the FOFA Gallery Courtyard. Perhaps the most challenging part of this experience was to simply come up with a title for the exhibition series, but more importantly, to establish a sort of theoretical framework that would guide our decisions and how we wanted these works to be presented in such a broad, dynamic group of artists from around the globe. So we decided on, so this is just more photos from our setup and sort of curatorial process. On the left, we have Leolia Schwagi's works, Absences, which is still on display in the EV Junction if you would like to go check it out. And then Renata, no, it's not anymore.
It's not.
It's still there.
Yeah, it's still there. I know, it's just been so long we forget. Jason Sikowak with Renata going over his exhibition, which was on display in the Art History Vitrine. An installation shot of those two. Here we go. So we decided on Waterways, Asian Indigenous Relations in Contemporary Art, which carries a few layers to its significance. First, Waterways implies a flowing, interwoven, interconnected action. And of course, waterways have long stood as sites of knowledge, trade, navigation, and cross-cultural exchange. They also act as both connectors and separators of islands, which brings me to the introduction of the exhibition's central sort of theoretical philosophy stemming from an essay from the late Samoan, Fijian scholar, Epele Ho'ofa. He argues that the colonial phrase, islands in a far sea, has suggested that island chains are economically and culturally insignificant in comparison to their Western counterparts. So instead, he transforms this phrase into what we call a sea of islands, highlighting the connectedness that water offers in cultural exchange, strength, and intercultural generosity. So with that said, Waterways urges for connectivity in its displayed works. Water, no matter how big or small its path, connects all of us. And of course, we can't forget that Montreal is an island, Manhattan is an island, where Beatrice is currently based. Many of the artists that we're visiting come from islands. And so in Waterways, artists speak to their relationships to water and to land through a vast range of interdisciplinary approaches to research and creation. Before going into the exhibition program in more detail, I just wanted to share with you the types of auxiliary programming that were offered as a part of GAX. On our first day, we had working groups or sort of workshops in which GAX's participants split up to deal with specific issues, including breaking down the definitions of what Asian Indigenous means, curating hospitality, alternate contact stories, and performing queer Asian Indigenous relationalities and climate change. These issues acted as the sort of pediments to GAX's scholarly and artistic framework, as many of the artists and researchers invited to GAX were working through these issues. On the left we have, I think this was, was this storytelling?
Yeah.
And on the right we had, I believe this was climate change. No, I know, they're all there, but I just don't remember which two these were taken from. But these focused working groups provided participants to work through these issues together, and most importantly, to meet with one another and share experiences and knowledge before the sort of main conference programming of presentations and the exhibitions came through. So the following day, among other presentations by GAX's participants, we hosted an artist panel, a roundtable discussion to speak to the diverse practices to some of the artists presented in Waterways. So here, from left to right, we have Jason Sikowak, Renata Quitten-Papp, myself in the middle, Beatrice Glow, and Kari Noe. relationships to water and to land were among the commonalities presented in the work and research of these artists, which I will get into shortly. And then later that day, the GACS team had the pleasure of sharing Waterways with its exhibited artists and GACS participants. So it was a highlight to see and hear the artists speak to their work, and as mentioned earlier, to meet and recognize the commonalities between their practices. Waterways presented the work of 8 artists, 5 of whom were exhibited in the library: Beatrice Glow, Kari Noe, Dan Polapapa McMullen, Henry Sang, and Stephanie Chung. So I'm just going to go through some of the artists that were exhibited in the vitrine, which will segue into Beatrice's presentation. So Kari Noe, born and raised on the island of Kauai in Hawaii, works in digital animation and computer programming. Her project, Kilu Oku, is a VR or virtual reality simulation that engages with Hawaiian wayfinding, a navigational method that was obscured upon the annexation of the Hawaiian kingdom in the late 19th century. The user can interact with and engage with the Hawaiian night sky aboard a va'a or a double-hulled canoe named Okulea. This still in particular shows what the user would see upon wearing a VR headset. So you can see the native Hawaiian language kind of showing the names of the stars and the navigational directions. And of course, the point of view is that you were aboard the Okulea and you have the water around you, and the user can manipulate the direction, manipulate the sort of angle of the stars, the longitude, latitude, etc. So I really highly encourage you to check out her work online. It's very interesting, and unfortunately, I just have a still to show you right now, but it's much more dynamic and much more diverse than her practice as a whole. Henry Sang is a Vancouver-based artist whose works employ video, photography, and modes of interactive media to speak to the spatial politics of history, language, community, food, and cultural translation through global flows of people, culture, and capital. Tansy Point, pictured here in Oregon, is the site on the south shore near the mouth of the Columbia River, where the Anson-Dart treaties were signed in 1851 between the Chinook peoples and the US government. So in this video installation, two texts scroll across the screen, one written by early settler James Swan, and the other the current chair of the Chinook Nation, Tony Johnson, who writes about the legacy of these agreements. So you can see how the person standing in front of the installation doesn't block out the text, but they block out the rest of the image. And there's an essay by Diane in the catalog about this work in particular, so, and about many of these works that I'm briefly touching on. And on the work to the left, Dan Talapapa McMullen is a upstate New York-based artist and poet from American Samoa. Queer Voyages, pictured here, is a series of photo collages and prints looking at a history of suppression from the clash between the West and queer Polynesia by including a fa'afafine, a third gender which embodies both the feminine and masculine in Samoan culture. The words in the prints are taken from writings by Captain James Cook, Captain William Bligh, and other explorers and missionaries who labeled the queer Polynesians as, quote, abominations and monsters, to scientists like anthropologist Margaret Mead, who classified them also as perverts and deviants. So this is a more pictorial work, but the other works in this series are more text-based and show directly the sort of printed words of these explorers and scientists. So as a response to these derogatory terms, the photo collage series illustrates fa'afafine traditions of queer lives and relationships by including photos of the artist's friends, tourist snapshots, and a historical photograph of a fa'afine in Apia, Samoa, while reappropriating paintings by Picasso and John Lafarge, as seen most evidently, I think, in this photo to the left. And it also coincided with a publication that was launched as a part of GACS in between Dan and EAHR called Queer Lives, or Queer Samoan Lives, I should say, which had its launch upstairs in the EV. And then to the right, we have one of the works of Beatrice Glow from her ongoing project, Manahata VR, Envisioning Lenape Way, which brings together the past and present of one Broadway block in New York City and engages with Manhattan's, New York's indigenous histories and heritage. And so with that, I just want to show a photo of Beatrice's exhibition currently on view in the Department of Geography, Environment and Planning here at Concordia, which extends on the histories and subject matter brought upon through her work in Waterways. And with that, we can switch the floor to Beatrice. Beatrice?
Yes. present.
Yay! Okay, we're just gonna switch the screen up.
Thank you, Austin.
All right.
Well, I am going to share my screen and let me know
Okay.
if it looks okay,
Stop sharing our screen.
Yeah.
because I couldn't actually see your presentation, I just saw
Right.
your Google Chat the whole time.
Okay.
Oh, wait, you have to stop sharing first.
Yeah, it's on top.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah. The middle.
Oh, this one. Sorry, not familiar with this. Okay.
Okay.
Great, okay,